welcome to Iconic Talk. This is your community's podcast with conversations about real estate, local happenings, and all things Winchester, Virginia. I'm Mark Francis, a local realtor, broker, and owner at Icon Real Estates.
And I'm Megan Eanes, a local realtor for 21 years and part of the Icon Real Estate team. Mark and I are so excited to share everything that we love about Winchester, Virginia with you. We want you to be an informed, savvy real estate consumer in today's ever-changing market.
Yep, if you want local knowledge, you've come to the right place. Well, it was cool to release an episode on Thanksgiving.
I thought
and
so also.
We've gotten feedback from people about having Thanksgiving conversations. And yeah, my Thanksgiving went as predicted. How about you?
About the same. You can't beat a Thanksgiving at the beach. I mean, ever. So it was wonderful.
Yep, gotta love it. And I just did not get a chance to go to North Carolina. My son went down there and my wife helped, with transportation and got him back into town safe and sound, but he ran an amazing race. And that was an opportunity for them to go visit some family on the way back in town also. And it gave me a chance to just sit back, relax, watch some soccer, which,
that's right.
I'm always excited about sitting back and just watching soccer games. So that was my Thanksgiving. And hopefully you guys out there in the listening audience had a good one as well. We continue to like to hear from you, so share your stories. Let us know, how your turkey day went and what things you're looking forward to coming up for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I just want to harken back to some of our older episodes because I'm sharing our history with a lot of people now, and we're up to episode 70.
I know
now, and so there's a lot of content that's out there that we're not going to repeat, but we're going to go back to. So several weeks ago on episode 59, I was able to share some thoughts on flipping, and the title is The Art of Flipping. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it, we mentioned how there is another kind of investing, and it's building a portfolio, renting, and building your net worth that way. Well, we finally have gotten the expert on the panel here today to join us, Ross Lehman, who also has been on the show before, and he shared his story about how he got into lending, and he didn't get a chance to get into this portion of his business because we really focused on his lending. But, and by the way, that show is back in May. I don't have the actual number on that one. I'll tell you in a second here. Yeah, Fluctuating Rates is the name of it, episode 42.
Okay.
So if you want to get an update of kind of the history of Ross Lehman before we talk to him now, go back and listen to that episode.
Episode 42, okay.
But this is going to be an amazing interview because he breaks down the myths and the fears of building a portfolio of owning houses. And part of my fear of why I flip is I don't want to deal with all the hassle and headaches of owning houses and people calling me in the middle of the night. He gets a chance to address that. So I'm excited about our conversation. Here is Ross Lehman from Integrity Home Mortgage to share with us how to build a house portfolio. Well, we're here with Ross Lehman once again, second time around.
Second time's a charm, right?
I love it. Yeah. I mean, having you on before to talk about your, primary vocation was great. And we'll get to that at the end.
Sure.
But like we mentioned here in the beginning, several weeks ago on the podcast, we had an episode about flipping. And we want to hear your story of how you got into the investment game.
Sure.
Looking back on how you explained, where you came from with the other episode of being a nurse and all of that and coming into town, it's an adventure.
Sure.
And you're jumping into real estate, the deep end right away.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So give us a quick little rundown on what interests you about investing in houses.
Sure. So there's a couple things that got me into it, and then a reason that I got into real estate as the investment, because there's all different kind of investment types, but for me, real estate made a lot of sense. So what got me into it, obviously, as you grow up, you start thinking about the future. When you're young and naive, you're just thinking about tomorrow. But as I was getting older, think about future, having family, having a wife. That for us, a goal was for her to be a stay-at-home mom. So we just started thinking about, how do I want to put the money that I have in my new job as a new nurse, and make that work for us rather than, just spending everything that we had. And, I came from a background where we didn't have a lot of funds. And so there was a motivational factor for me to try to give more to my family than what I had to grow up with. I had wonderful family and wonderful parents, but financial means, it was nice to have something that had a little bit more. And so I actually was talking about it with one of the nurses at the time, and ironically, he's actually on my team as a loan officer now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how the world works like that. Ed Pabone.
Bring him to the dark side.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep. And we were talking about this, and he's like, well, hey, you got to read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Good book.
Exactly. It's one of the best books I ever read. And I tell people, look, it's not a how-to book, it's a why book. And so after reading that, I was like, yeah, I really need to do something with this investing, because at the time I was just paying down my debts. And I thought, that's the best thing to do with it, pay down these student loans, get ahead that way. And I just started thinking about, if I started investing that same amount of money that I was spending rather than paying off the debts, what was going to be the short-term and the long-term gains from that? Okay, that's what Rich Dad Poor Dad really started getting me thinking about, is where can I get my money to work for me as opposed to just paying off debts? And don't get me wrong, there's nothing bad about paying off debts, but for me, it became something of both a short-term and a long-term gain of, making that money, that dollar, get me the furthest. And so started thinking about the options, what are the options? Get into the stock market, which I knew nothing about, get into, growing a business, which I didn't really have any interest in at the time. And then what I already had, which was a house. I had already bought my first house. I had already, understood the loan about it. So I easily could translate that into working for me. And so that's when I just started, doing some research on what would it be to, rent out this house and jump into buying other properties.
Was that the same time that you went down the path of being a mortgage broker?
So it was actually a couple years before. So it was, we actually just found out that we were pregnant with our first a couple months earlier. Yes, it was very exciting, but at the same time, we knew our goal.
And that's nerve-wracking at the same time, too.
It is. And my poor wife, she was just kind of along for the ride on those things. And I have to tell you, for the first property, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, I don't even know if my current house is going to rent. So I just threw it up on Craigslist and fully got someone ready to rent it. And now I'm like, shoot, I need to find somewhere that I can go. So I had to quick find another house. And so ironically, that first house, I actually went to view it with my real estate agent and called my wife up and said, hey, I know you haven't seen this house yet, but do you trust me?
Oh, wow.
And she's like,
That's a good woman.
Yes, I trust you. And so we put an offer in on that house without my wife ever seeing it. And I think in the long run, ended up being good for us. But that's we just kind of jumped in with it, not having everything figured out, but kind of figuring some things out along the way to get that started.
So let me just not back up, but pause you, because what you're saying is that you owned the house that you were living in.
I did.
And you decided to say, I can rent the house that I'm currently living in.
Right.
Go buy another house, knowing that you can qualify for a loan.
Sure.
And go live there.
Yes.
So basically, it's uprooting your entire household, moving all of your things, and going to a second house, but yet not selling your existing house.
Correct.
Renting it.
Correct.
And so that's certainly a step that seems easy.
Correct.
But how do you go through that process just from, again, the money side of things?
Sure.
And you are a lender, so you can talk us through that as well. But that's one path to take.
Correct.
And then I'm curious of now, where are you down the path
Sure.
of just from pausing in the story here? But just walk us through that scenario of renting your existing house to then go buy a new one.
Well, and the reason that I decided to go that route is because, I was looking at what I was putting money towards. And at the time, it was my student loans. Okay. And, I had a monstrous amount of student loan debt. And so I was starting to do, the calculations and just think, okay, if I pay this $90,000 in student loans. At the end of it, I've got nothing. Okay. But what if I take that same amount or even a lesser amount, and I just take a fraction of that and buy another house, okay? And, that's the advantage of buying another primary and renting out your current houses. You can get into that new house with sometimes 0 money down, 3%, 5% down. So really low funds compared to paying off a full debt, okay? And then while running through those numbers, I found that doing that paid off half of my student loan payment. So by doing a 3% down, it took less than $10,000 on the next house. And that $10,000 was paying essentially $45,000 worth of student loan debt if I could just apply the money I was making by renting and put that towards my student loans. So that's what started my mind thinking of, okay, maybe I don't need to apply all that money to the debt. Maybe I apply it to an asset that can pay off that debt. And at the end of the day, once that debt is paid, I still have the house and I can still rent it out and I can still grow appreciation in the property. So that's what led me into, buying the next primary residence. And, once I got into that house, and it took me about a year, I bought one that was in pretty rough shape. And this is what I tell people too, it was good enough shape for me to be able to buy it with a loan, but it had a long way to go for me to be able to fix it up and get a lot of sweat equity into the home. So about a year later after I had worked on that, I'm like, hey, why don't I just do this again?
So was that your plan all along, or it turned into the plan?
It turned into the plan because it was really the only viable plan at the time. And, really you can buy a house as your primary residence after living in your current house for about a year.
Okay.
And you can buy the next one as a primary residence. You get primary residence rates and primary resident down payments, which are going to be better for primary residences.
Let me ask you a quick question.
For sure.
So that first one that you did, how did you get past the fear of somebody else living in your house and what they potentially could do to it? Because that's where I know a lot of people are stuck.
Definitely.
So how did you get past that?
Yeah.
Or was it even a fear?
Well, it definitely was a fear. I mean, my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time. The first house that we owned, still today, 20-some houses later, is the newest house I ever bought. So there was a fear of what are they going to do to my property? What are they going to, are they going to ruin it? Are they going to get, am I going to go in there and they dumped trash down, the garbage disposal, which I've had happen before. So there are fears there and true fears, but, anytime that you are investing, you are weighing the risks versus the potential negative outcomes versus the potential positive side. And so for me, the risk of not being able to achieve what I wanted to in my 20s and waiting was, it was better to take the risk of getting a tenant that might do something to the property.
That makes sense.
So, really you got to kind of see where you are with that risk level there. And, for me, I had to just overcome that and say, let's give it a try. Worst case scenario, we sell the houses and we start over again.
Right.
And what I did to help with that is, even though I got a lot of applicants, I really went through them with a fine-tooth comb. Now I can be a little bit more flexible and look at, what is the potential income from it. But for that one, I wanted to make sure that I had a good tenant that was going to treat it well. So I got, I just really went through the credit report, went through, income and how, that it was very stable, all those type of factors that you kind of do when you're getting a loan. But I did that for the first tenant that I had. And my cash flow wasn't great, but it helped me take that step.
I was just going to ask you that question. So cash flow, that's something that, is an easy word to say. You're like, oh, I'm going to rent my house and I'm going to be making money every month.
Right.
So, what was your goal in getting cash flow? I mean, obviously you have monthly expenses.
Right.
And then you're trying to get the tenant to pay those monthly expenses and maybe even make some.
Right.
So in your experience now, looking down the road, were you thinking properly about cash flow when you first took this leap of faith?
I think in some ways I was, and in other ways I now look for more of a monthly cash flow to cover not just short-term expenses, but long-term expenses too. The nice thing that I liked about that first one, which for a first-time investor, I always recommend renting the house that you have, because it's kind of like, you know how you get to know either your spouse or your significant other. You know what's going to make them tick. You know you say a certain something, it's going to upset them or make them feel good. It's kind of how it is with a house. If you've lived in it, you know that toilet clogs up every 3 months. There's probably something wrong there. Okay. You know more or less the age of the house. You know your HVAC system. You know how the house works. And so renting out that house is a lot simpler, because if you get that call that toilet is backed up, it's not a surprise, and you're not willing to throw in the towel over something you expected. So to kind of go back to your question, is getting that first house of sorry, say your question one more time.
Cash flow.
Cash flow, yes.
Yeah.
So, and going that first house, taking that leap was more important than just cash flow.
Yep.
The other thing about that house is that it did have an HOA, which sometimes is terrible.
Yeah.
In this instance, it actually helped a lot, because it helped take some of those things that would have been my responsibility and helped put it on somebody else. And it did take my cash flow away, because I had that HOA did go up over time, but it did help with who's going to take care of exterior maintenance, who's going to take care of water bills, some of those type of things that the HOA was taking care of that I didn't have to worry about for the tenant.
So I'm sure everybody thinks differently, but since you are a lender, you like numbers and you're crunching numbers. So how do you keep track of these expenses? Do you have a big grand master, I don't know, like app or spreadsheet, or what do you use to track these numbers to make sure that you know that you're on top of the cash flow?
Sure. And, I would probably say I'm somewhere in the middle, where I'm not like my father or father-in-law, who are both CPA accountants, and they're logging every single thing in that they do. I'm also not negligent of it, where I don't monitor anything. So what I do, and it's a continual practice for me, is try to at least log the important things. What am I paying, on a monthly basis for these things, and especially if it's something I'm covering, electric, water, sewer, any of those type of things, gas bills. I also make sure that if there's maintenance, that it's somehow being covered or monitored on a monthly or annual basis.
Right.
And part of the ways that I found has been beneficial to do that is actually having someone else maintain the properties, a property maintenance, because they will keep track of that, and it comes on, my end of the year form that I get to say these were the factors that, we had to keep in maintenance. When I'm evaluating a property, I'm looking at those things as well. Looking at what are the costs that I'm going to have to cover. If it's a multi-unit, if everything is put into one thing, I need to be able to account for that in what I'm charging for my rents. I also need to make sure that, what is the age of the roof? What is the age of the HVAC? Because a lot of times you're just thinking, hey, these are the monthly costs. Hey, it's covering that, and I get a few dollars extra. But then you're hit with that, $15,000 roof bill, and you're like, man, that really eats my long-term cash flow.
Long-term cash flow is now gone.
Exactly.
Now, do you use some sort of system for this, or just Excel?
So I just use, Excel.
Okay.
As far as logging the stuff, I'm using QuickBooks. But as far as, when I'm evaluating a property, I am using like Excel. I have a spreadsheet I put together to help me try to formulate what those things are. So, and, a lot of times when I'm looking at it too, there's factors as far as, and we can get into this a little bit more if you want, but the ability when you're investing to put money in, get your money back out, and still be able to cash flow is extremely important, because it can be very costly to get into real estate. But the great thing about real estate is that you have a lot of your hands to be able to put money in, to be able to get that money back out again.
I do want to talk about that. That's kind of my next layer is fast forward a little bit.
Sure.
So you took that leap of faith to say, hey, honey, let's go move, to then, okay, let's do this again in a year.
Yeah.
And now, your actual liquid cash is probably still not huge.
Sure.
So you're now relying on getting a loan and tapping into that to buy another house. Are you then, reinvesting in other things, and how do you grow to where now you are actually becoming more liquid with cash instead of just being house poor and owning several houses that are just basically breaking even?
Right.
Where's that next step? How do you do that are you, just a simple question, are you refinancing and taking money out to then reflow and cycle it? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah. So the terrible thing about real estate investors is we never have cash available because we're always having it out there trying to make money for us. I tell everybody I always feel cash poor because my cash is always out there. And that's my goal. If I have cash sitting, let's make it work for me. And so, cash is always the hardest part, especially getting to the point where in real estate, if you can start making cash transactions, it really starts helping you to leverage your purchases as opposed to saying, I need to get a loan. It needs to go through the loan process. Obviously, the goal is, hey, can you do a cash purchase, do what you need to do to it, and then get the loan on top of it, and hopefully get the money back out of it.
After the fact. After you've purchased it with the cash that you've somehow borrowed from somewhere else.
Yep. And that's where you're either, trying to get private investors. That's usually the easiest place to start. Hey, do you have an uncle that has money? Or do you know someone that has money? I think most people do. They just don't want to take the risk of offending someone or feeling like they're asking for a handout. And I have to remind people, you're not asking for a handout. You are giving them an option to make money maybe some better in something that actually is tangible than, say, putting it into the stock market.
Or even getting into business with somebody.
Right.
Exactly.
So there's the friendship component, the family component of, whatever. And I do this as well when I talked about our flipping concept. I'm the same way with the having cash up front.
Right.
And make it a win-win situation, but put it in writing.
Right.
Make it firm, and even if it is family, even if it is friends, don't let that slide to where it's not in writing, and they know what they're getting into, and they know what their returns will be.
Well, if you make it something rational instead of emotional, that's the big difference. So whoever you're working with, borrowing it from, as long as they can see it as a transaction instead of I'm lending you money, which usually comes with strings and all kinds of other things.
Exactly. If you start making it feel like they're doing you a favor, then it just feels like, there's a lot of weight on one side. And so, if you're doing it, do it like a business. Come to them with what is it going to be with the value afterwards? What's the rent going to be? Not only is your initial plan, do you have a backup plan? Okay, if this doesn't work out, what's your second option? Okay, so if you're going to them with that, it really helps go a long way. Just approach it like you would a bank. Okay, people aren't going to give you, tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars for no reason. They want to know how they're going to get that money back.
Right. Exactly.
So in the very beginning of the process, I did have to use private money to start it. Especially, the first one was a loan. The second one needed a lot of work. It wasn't going to go with a loan. So I did have to get private money in order to do that. And we did that exact same thing. We had everything as if it was, a bank that I was borrowing it from, and even recorded as such. So, that doing a cash transaction as a purchase for the next one really helped take that to the next level of being able to leverage money that was not mine into that purchase, because I was able to buy that next one cash, put money into it, and then when I refinanced that, I got all the money back out to be able to pay off that lender, and now I'm just cash flowing on that property without having very much money of my own into it. So, in the beginning, you have to go that route. Now, at this point, once you do a couple of those, and whether you get money with flips, as you mentioned, or you're starting to gain equity and cash flow in your own business, then you can start leveraging the funds of those properties into more properties. And you got to be careful there. You don't want to over leverage yourself. And banks have made it a lot better than it was, 15, 20 years ago, to try to make sure you're not over leveraged. But it's still important to be able to make sure you're not taking so much cash out of a property, and now you're showing negative cash flow. At least that's what's important for me.
Right.
Because, when the dust settles, you need to be able to be generating income for the business.
So where are you now? So, fast forward, you've been doing this for a few years now, and how many properties are out there? Give or take, you don't have to give us all your numbers,
Sure,
but tell us
sure.
kind of what are the stats for you?
Yeah, so for me, I personally have 18 properties. I'm in the process. I'm under contract for 2 more duplexes. So I'll be having 4 more, hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months. Bought, renovated, and refinanced, that's, my goal is to have, about 50 in the next, 3 to 4 years. So right now, a lot of them, what I'm doing, and some of them I will say, a good portion of them are with a partnership. So that's another thing that can help leverage your business, is doing it with a partner. It decreases your risk. It gives other insights, and you want to find a partner that will help complement you. And so being able to get that partner can help you grow exponentially rather than, just multiply by 2, because now you have 2 people that are out there. You've got the banks look at you a little bit more securely. So having that partner can really help grow that.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll have 14 with a partner, and then I'll have 8 of those personally myself.
That's awesome.
So what year did you start? When was the first one?
Yes, so I started, it would have been 7 years ago. So 2015 is when I started.
Kind of just a slow, gradual build.
Yes.
And then once you see it working,
Yes.
and then you're like, hey, I got to keep this ball going.
Exactly. And I'll say the first 3 were about the first 5 years. And I think it was 13 of those were within the last 2 years. So, you see it start to grow on itself. So that's one thing that a lot of people, make a mistake of. They want to be the real estate tycoon, and then they start trying to gobble everything up, and before you know it, you're the dog that caught the bus and you can't make your payments. And so and then it starts hurting your credit. Once your credit is hurt, it's really hard to recover from that, or you've even worse than that, created negative, poor relationships, because in the industry, your word to other people who are lending you money is worth more than anything. And so once you tarnish that, it's hard to get that back again.
Yep. Yeah. So just a final kind of question, or pick your brain, because you compare this to flipping, and I was able to explain that several weeks ago. It's similar concept of how you're building and growing kind of a nest egg, but in the flipping concept, you're selling each time. So as I explain how I do it, using the same kind of investor concept, and then selling, and then growing from that, growing your nest egg so you can keep building, and then not really relying as much on investors.
Right.
You're doing the same concept, but you're retaining the properties.
Correct.
I guess my explanation of why I flip, because I don't like to be a property manager.
Sure.
And I don't want to have to deal with the headaches.
Sure.
So you have a similar path.
Yeah.
But explain how you have handled kind of the potential headaches, or the idea of being a property manager, because yes, you are paying, it sounds like, a service to companies to do that for you.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's working for you. So give us the benefits of why people should go down the path of building a portfolio instead of just straight up buying and selling.
Sure. And, I have flipped some properties, and it really depends on, what type of properties are you buying. And some of them aren't really long-term holding materials. So, depending on those houses is how I evaluate. Do I want to hold on to it for a long term, or do I just want to sell this one, take the profits for reinvestment to something else? For me, it was more of a long-term play. This is something that I want to be able to provide now for my family and down the line. So that's why I'm holding on to these properties, because I'm in it for both the multiplication of the cash flow, as well as appreciation over time. And that's one of the things that I love about real estate that really, kind of took me a little bit of time to grasp is why real estate over, say, like stocks. Okay. So you put $10,000 into stocks, your $10,000 is what grows. So even let's say it grows at 8%, then you're only growing that $10,000 at 8%. But in real estate, if you put $10,000 into, say, a house that's $200,000, you're gaining, and let's say it's the same rate of return of 8%, you're getting 8% on the 200,000,
right,
not on your
initial investment.
Exactly. So the leveraged growth of that was so huge, and trying to grasp why is real estate working for me. Should I start putting my eggs into different baskets? And I started becoming frustrated because I did that and I wasn't getting the rate of return. So I'm like, why am I putting my eggs in different baskets? And you'll get all different kind of people telling you differently, and that's okay. But I'm like, why can't I do that rather than leverage that money more? What I found very early on, because when I started it, I started talking to people who were also doing investing, especially real estate investing. And I found the people that are like, oh, yeah, I did that. And we became so tired and frustrated. We just decided just to sell it. Most of them got to the point of about 2 to 4 units. And that's just like, okay, that does what we need it to do. But at that point, you're starting to get those calls. Okay, 2 to 4 units. You're getting those calls. Hey, we've got this leak, or the toilet, or the roof, or whatever it is. And so 2 to 4 units is one of those hard times to where it's like, it's not really enough to give to a management company, but it's also, it becomes kind of a headache to be able to hassle with. And you get to that point where you're like, I might as well just work overtime at my job because I know that job and it's less of a headache. But it's not really good in the long term.
Right.
Okay. So I found that once I got over that 2 to 4 unit hump and be like, okay, we need to give this to somebody else that can take away 95% of those headaches. And then, yes, it's going to cost me money, but as long as I'm putting that into what I project as, my cash flow, and I just know it's going to be a cost of doing business, it takes that weight off to be able to say, okay, let's go continue to expand. Let's go, I don't feel that weight of those calls anymore because that's what's hindering you. That's what got those people out of it.
Well, and you still have a full-time job, too,
Exactly.
on top of the business
And kids.
and kids. So, you can't be answering your phone all the time with
Exactly.
however many tenants that you have. So that does sound like it's worth it.
Well, it's
Exactly.
worth taking the jump.
Yes.
The leap of faith. Again, hearing your story starting from basically just a whim and saying, I think I want to do this, and let's go ahead and buy another house and rent the one we live in to where you are now can hopefully be inspiring to people to say, I've been thinking about this, but how do I do it, and do I take the jump?
Sure. And your wife is pretty awesome.
She
just say,
exactly.
all right, fine.
We
picked out a house for me?
We moved 5 times in a 2.5-year period, both for moving from states, but also because of this too. And so, she just kind of said, hey, I'm along for a ride, and now she loves it. She gets really into it as well. But it did take that leap of faith because you are taking some security out of your life. And that is difficult for, especially if you have a family. Now, one thing I will say, a lot of times people think, they look at it and they say, oh, great, passive income. I want more passive income.
Right.
And so with that, just know, nothing is truly passive. You can get it to the point to where it's passive, but you do have to work at that in the beginning. And so, finding the deals, working the numbers, doing the rehabs, whatever it is time staking, it is painful, it is, you're nervous, is it going to appraise for what I needed to, am I making the right decisions? So I will not tell anybody that is just an easy breezy, go out there, buy a house, it's going to be simple. It's not like that.
You got to work. There's still stuff
So
to
it
do.
sounds like, you're obviously still in the nursing, doing that when this all first started.
Yes.
So was that kind of the precursor to, look, if we're buying these houses and I'm spending this on mortgage fees and whatnot, that you could be benefiting from it doing the business. Is that where this came into the career you have now?
It became a huge part of it because what I found was I love this. I love investing into real estate, and I love talking to people about it. And I started talking to people about how they can do it. And, I was becoming a little bit tired, I'll just say it that way, in my job. And so, I was like, well, I'm already helping people achieve this. Why not start a career that I can get paid to do that? Because it's something that I'm passionate about, something that I believe in. Not that I don't believe in the medical field at all, but, we have so much financial illiteracy in our country, and this is one way that we can help people build wealth. Wealth is so difficult. We think of being rich, but wealth, the ability to recuperate funds and be able to provide and have your dollar make you money. We just don't talk about very much in this country. And so starting to talk to people about that was really a passion of mine.
That's awesome. Well, you're inspiring. Hopefully a lot of people listening.
Thank
So
you.
keep it up. And instead of having 5 iconic questions for you, because you've been here before,
Sure.
you know the questions, you might give the same or different answers. I like to put you in the hot seat with your current job of being a lender.
Sure.
We're going to go through just some quick hitting questions here real quick
Okay.
that you can give us the state of the union of where we are.
Okay.
So question number 1, what are the current rates right
Sure.
now?
Yeah, so I'm seeing anywhere from mid 6s to mid 7s.
Okay.
And it really depends on loan program, credit, how much you're putting as a down payment, all those different type of things. I'm also finding that paying points more than even a year or two ago can get you a lot further of a distance. So making sure that's part of your communication with your loan officer, because a lot of people think, hey, I'll just put more money down and it's going to save me on my monthly payment. But sometimes paying a fraction of that towards a point will actually save you more on your monthly payment.
Cool.
So
You're covering my second question. What are those costs of paying points?
Sure.
What does that look like?
So 1 point is 1% of the loan amount.
Okay.
I just had someone the other day that paying 2 points got her down more than 1% on her loan, on her interest rate. So that 2 points might have cost, $4,000. Paying that towards your, down payment, save her maybe $35-$40 a month, but paying it down towards a point, which was over a full 1% interest, it was saving her about $120 a month or more. So, working to see how can you apply those funds to where it's going to work best for you.
What are you telling those first-time home buyers right now that are struggling to find a place? What are your predictions for? Are the rates going to drop? That's the big question right now. That a lot of our buyers, me and Megan, are just they're staying put.
They're waiting.
What are we encouraging these buyers right now to do? Should they wait because rates are going to drop, or should they just keep working with what they've got and look at this point concept?
Sure. So that's going to be it's a hard question to answer because will rates drop? I have no idea.
Can't you put your
Come
little
on, I think. I mean,
your wizard hat on
if you're
and predict
asking
the future?
me, I mean, I think that it's a good possibility. I think we're intentionally slowing the economy down, and I think anytime we do things intentionally, we're okay, and even maybe want to overshoot that. At which point, if we do overshoot that, the way that they'll help correct that overshooting is by maybe reducing those interest rates again. So I think it's a good possibility. What I'm also reminding buyers is that regardless, it's still a good time for them to buy for reasons other than rate, because with first-time home buyers, interest rates are important. But the other items are almost even more important. Okay, first-time home buyers tend to need other loan types other than conventional or cash. They might need USDA, FHA, VA loans. They may need closing cost assistance. They might need to be able to, work with the sellers and get, inspections and get, the full appraisal amount and be reliant on the appraisal value. So those things can be really important for first-time home buyers, even more than, say, the monthly payment for the interest rate. And we've shifted that dramatically in the last 6 months to a year to where we couldn't get inspections. They weren't accepting non-conventional or cash options because there was already 10 offers on the house. Now that we're seeing that change, the buyers have more power to get what they want. And what's the common saying out there? Date the rate, marry the house. They can get the house that they want. And then, if rates do change, they can get a better rate later.
Right.
And a house is a long-term investment. Okay.
Right.
Most people aren't buying a house because they're planning on, selling it in a year. So it's really important to be able to decide where you're going to live, and then as long as it fits in your budget, and then adjusting what that rate can be down the line.
Yeah, love it. Quick final question. Well, two more. This is question number
Sure.
4. What's the most common loan that you're seeing people get right now?
Oh, good one. Good question.
I would still say conventional is still, but I am seeing a lot more FHA and USDA loans being used for that exact reason, where, first-time home buyers felt they had to go conventional even if it was costing them more a month. So that's the important part too, is I saw a lot of first-time home buyers last year go into a conventional loan, pay more a month because of the conventional loan, and now they can use USDA or FHA, and it's actually costing them less compared to a conventional loan. So I would say probably what I'm seeing is about 50-50 between the government loans and conventional at this point.
So the final question are just kind of the costs. What are the closing costs related to all those kinds of loans? Are they all about the same? And then if so, what's the percentage that people can expect?
Yeah, so closing costs between the different loan types are going to be pretty much the same. Okay. There's going to be a little bit of variance maybe on the appraisal costs. So you're talking within $100 or $200. They're about the same. But as far as using a rule of thumb, a good rule of thumb in Virginia is about 3% of the sales price. Now that starts to break down because some of those costs are fixed costs. Our lender fees are fixed costs. Not all lenders are, but ours are. And then title company costs tend to be very similar. And appraisal costs are going to be about the same regardless of loan amount. So there's going to be costs that stay the same regardless of a $500,000 purchase or a $200,000 purchase.
Good.
So right around $300,000 is where that 3% rule works. Just know it's going to be a little bit more if you go below that, maybe a little bit less as you go above that.
Got it. You are good. Quick on the draw. I love it.
You know your stuff.
You passed the test of the State of the Union questions, except you didn't put your wizard hat on enough to tell us exactly what's going to happen down the road.
I forgot my my magic ball today, but I'll see if I can bring that next time.
Perfect. We'll need that. Well, give us just a quick rundown of how people can connect with you, obviously as a lender, but if you sparked interest in somebody, it sounds like you're willing to kind of share your thoughts.
Definitely.
How can people contact you?
Yeah, you can reach me at mortgagebyross.com. I'm also on Facebook, Mortgage by Ross. And then phone number, email, I'm pretty open to any of those type of things.
Great. Yep. All the contact is out there for you. So, Ross, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I've been wanting to have you come on to talk about this for a while now. So thanks for squeezing in your time.
Thanks for having me.
We love having you back again,
absolutely.
too.
I'll be happy to come back if you want me.
Thanks. Well, thanks to Ross, and he's a wealth of knowledge.
Very, very knowledgeable, very well spoken. It was wonderful. A lot of great information. I love the story about kind of how it started and just kind of going out on a limb and just doing it.
Yep. So what'd you learn? I mean, what kind of aspects of because you're right, wealth of knowledge, but also broke it down very easily in a tangible conversation.
Well, I think the big thing for me, which even spoke to me, is just that the first step of, looking at it as more of a business transaction. You bought your house, you're living in the house. All right, let's rent this house. We're moving, we're going to get another house, and then we're going to rent the one that we were in. And now you have 2 properties.
Yep.
And my big issue is just that fear of what happens if they trash that house, and now you have 2 mortgages, and so all of that.
Yeah.
So I liked hearing about how he handled that aspect, and I think that to me would be the biggest step, is getting over that first hurdle,
Yeah.
getting that first property outside of the one that you're living in, and then going from there.
And you got to think long term.
Right.
Don't look at it as just like, all the dread and the expenses of doing things right up front here. Think long term and that long term wealth. I'm struggling right now with my rental that I have. I have to replace the roof this week, and so I feel his pain of saying, "Oh, save the money away for a rainy day." Well, my rainy day is right now because rain is coming through the roof. So, yeah. But once you get past that, again, you're building equity in the house, even through those expenses that you're doing, through those repairs. You're going to eventually sell it one day down the road for a big pretty penny, and so
right, that and having a plan.
Yeah.
Like he has goals of how many properties he wants to have, kind of a time frame. So I think having those goals to look forward to and work towards is really helpful. Also,
the last couple of years to just be at 13 plus to build now to almost to 20, that's huge. Now I do have to say I got to put my real estate hat on as a realtor and say it's still important to pick the right place.
Right.
So it's still important to go through and be critical of, is this a good location where I can get maximum dollars for a tenant, and if I ever did have to just bail and sell it, is it a good location where I could sell it quickly? So I'm always going to be looking at it. If I'm working with any of you who are listening, I'm going to look at it from that investment potential down the road as well of, yes, is it a good location that will give you that kind of maximum dollars? So you don't want to just buy any old house and then hope it's going to do, produce magic dollars for you. So think critically about what that looks like.
So what did you anything that really stood out to you?
Yeah, the number of how quick he was able to grow. To me, that's impressive. And that's getting beyond that fear, taking that first step and then saying, this is what I want to do. And then having the drive and motivation to do it while having another job, to me, is impressive. And so if he can do it, I know other people can do it. And it takes a special skill set. But what I liked from him, what he said, is finding a partner so you can share the workload, find somebody who
compliments you.
Compliments you. That's the word I was looking for. Yep.
I got you.
Thank you. Love it. Well, Megan, take us down the road of what's happening in the world of Winchester, Frederick County this coming weekend.
All right, so coming up, we've got the oyster dinner or fried chicken dinner on Saturday, the 3rd at 4:30. It's the Star Tannery Volunteer Fire Department. They're going to have all kinds of great food. The oyster dinner is $18, and the chicken's $15. There's also, and I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago in a different episode, Abrams Delight. So didn't you do family pictures there?
We did.
So there's going to be an Abrams Delight annual candlelight tour. That would actually be really neat. That's going to be this Friday at 6 p.m. and Saturday from 3 to 7.
Awesome.
There's also Breakfast with Santa on Saturday from 8 to 11. It's Stephen City Fire and Rescue.
Cool.
And we're going to also have go from fire with the fire department. Follow the Star, which is a nativity guided walking tour. That is also Saturday and Sunday this weekend.
I will pause you there because that is my sweet spot there.
You take it from here.
Of Fellowship Bible Church. And, also I'll go back to prior episodes. So last year we were able to interview somebody from the church. Episode 21, it's called The Reason for the Season. And really, it's a very similar conversation that if you wanted to hear about it, you can go listen to that one. The primary difference, though, is that post-COVID, we're not just doing a driving tour. It's happening in person where you're still going to be able to walk around the different stations and see the camels and the animals and the angels and hear the singing and get cookies in a tent afterwards. So there's a lot of cool new things that are happening this year, and it's on Fellowship Bible Church's property.
Okay.
Whereas in the past, pre-COVID, it was at Creekside Battlefield, or
right.
the Kernstown Battlefield and Creekside Station. So at Fellowship Bible Church on Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 5 o'clock, you might see me there. Okay, so fair warning, if you do go, come look for me and maybe say hi.
And then we've also got an FFA alumni bake sale and soup sale. That's on Saturday the 4th and Monday the 5th at Sharando and Ayler during their fruit pickup. So they're going to be sold donation or free will offering.
We're in the season now.
Yes.
It is Christmas, so cookies and
soups
and parties and you name it. So yeah, we're having our icon party coming up here.
Oh yeah,
we're not inviting you guys to that. But we'll probably share some stories
afterwards. Yes.
about
ugly.
the fun.
Aren't we doing an ugly sweater Christmas party?
Yeah. Yep.
I believe there's a fanny pack that needs to get passed on to somebody else, if I recall.
Okay, just regifting. I see how it is. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Iconic Talk. We hoped you learned something from today's episode. I know I did, and look forward to sharing more with you next week. Remember, when you look for a real estate professional, make sure they're experienced, innovative, personal, dedicated, and available.
And we appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us. If you have a moment, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends.
Yep. Thanks to our editor extraordinaire, Simeon Battaglia. Until next time, think iconic.